This story actually comes from a very good friend of mine. The events that take place are 100% accurate, and to this day, it still terrifies him. This took place back when I was just 16 years old. It was the summer between 10th and 11th grade, and a couple of my friends had convinced me to do the summer drama production. Our rehearsals took place at the local middle school, which was built in 1958, and for the most part, it was a very fun experience, all except for one incident. During rehearsals, there was a lot of downtimes. If there was a scene being rehearsed that you were not a part of, you could just explore the school. Being teenage boys, my friends and I managed to gain access to the old basement in order to look around. When we first went down the old steps, we noticed a large room with what appeared to be boilers or some kind of AC heating unit. We looked around but quickly got bored. That was until we noticed a door at the base of the stairs that we somehow missed. My friends David, Josh, Cole, and I all approached the door and opened it. It was a very long room, probably 15 by at least 50 feet, and the floor was dirt. Dust filled the air, which made it very hard to see. It was probably filled with asbestos or lead paint chip particles, but hey, we were so young we didn't care. Stacks of desks and chairs lined the walls, going the whole way back to the room.
"I've been down here before, but I've never seen this room,"
said Josh.
"Yeah, I guess this is where they all store all the extra desks and stuff,"
Cullen replied. We continued walking back to the room and we realized the floor actually sloped up towards the ceiling gradually. By the time we were nearing the end of the room, we noticed that there were large amounts of pipes at the end, and the dirt sloped up to the pipes, which made the ceiling only about 3 feet high. At this point, we figured that we were under the foundation due to the pipes and dirt, but we continued anyway. I decided to take the front and start crawling through the mess of metal and PVC. Over the first, under the second, trying not to hit my head, I put in my phone flashlight into the mess of pipes to see where I was going. That's when I saw it. It was like a picturesque horror movie scene. On the other side of the maze of pipes was a 6x6 room, cut out in the now probably 4-foot high dirt. In the center of the room was a lone chair. I immediately froze, and not only fear, but confusion. There wasn't anything necessarily scary about the chair, but it gave you this feeling, this vibe that lurks in the back of your mind, almost like there was someone watching you, but there wasn't. I quickly yelled for my friends. They all came crawling through the pipes until they saw it. We made the decision right then and there to get the hell out of that basement. We didn't stop to take pictures or go further to investigate. Each and every one of us could feel the sense of dread that came off from the chair. I ran as fast as I could with not a care in the world for the people around me. After getting back upstairs, we sat and pondered what had just occurred. We all saw the chair. We all felt the feeling. But we couldn't even begin to talk about it. After a while, we eventually calmed down, which was when Josh told us something that made this so scary.
"If we couldn't even crawl through the pipes, how did someone get a chair back there and make an entire room?"
This all happened about 2 years ago now. Life has changed and most of the kids in the basement with me have fallen out. All of us remember the chair, but none of us try to talk about it. Why that is, I'm unsure. But something that I am sure of is that since that day, the chair has never left my mind. I've always been drawn to it. For some reason, I feel like I need to go back there. Whatever that is, it might just be my curiosity, or the chair is drawing me in as if it's some entity. I do not know. Someday I will go back, but today is not the day. And until then, I'll continue to see that chair in my nightmares. Just to start off with some backstory, my group of friends had started making a nasty habit of joking about the Wendigo. My friend Stacy and I didn't for a while, just due to the fact that we believed in the supernatural. But after a few months, it grew on us, and not knowing that the Wendigo can actually be triggered by such things, we joined in. The biggest mistake ever. I had just moved into the country, and we enjoyed making trips into town to have a few drinks, which is about a 30-minute walk from my place to town. At night, the first 10 minutes after leaving the bridge that leads out of town is pitch darkness, with no street lights. After that, street lights are very sparsely places, which can cause for a very creepy walk back without anything happening. So, with all that in place, let's continue. Stacy and I begin our night, walking into town, have some beers and have some fun. Shortly into the night, something slightly strange happens. We receive a phone call from her little sister at home crying and scared because she saw someone sitting on my friend Stacy's bed. She calms her sister down and asks her cousin to check her room for her sister at home. Everything is fine, no one is in the room. Also, ghosts and weird things happening at her house were very common, so a sighting like this was strangely regular. We continue our night. Into the night we meet a guy who seems pretty cool. He's riding a bike and tells us he's pretty drunk or something. We decide to hang with him for a bit, wanting to meet people in town. A ways into our hangout, we are sitting on a park bench, and the guy is laying on the ground in front of us. Suddenly my friend stands up and says it's time for us to go. I shrug and agree, and we get going. After getting away from him, she tells me how the guy bit her ankle. The day after, she had teeth bruises on her ankle. Kind of flustered the guy would do that, we continue our walk out of town. Finally, we pass the bridge, which is our last source of light for the next 10 minutes. We turn on our phone flashlights, and we turn on some music, trying to ease the spooky feeling of being in pitch darkness in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, we hear a voice behind us. We both jump. It's the same guy on his bike. He asks us if he can follow us until we reach the fork in the road. We need to go left, and he needs to go right. Still slightly creeped out, but we are almost at the street lights and the fork in the road. We agree. Regardless, he had to go that way, and so did we. After a bit of walking, we finally reached the fork in the road and the first street light. We sigh with relief, hoping he would leave, but he turns down our way instead of going the way he needs to go. Now, at this point we are thoroughly creeped out. We try to ignore it and keep walking, holding our breaths, wanting to reach the next streetlight, which is some ways away. Finally, after what felt like forever, we reach the next streetlight, which is also for some reason a small graveyard. Once we reach the streetlight, the guy stops dead in his tracks and doesn't move any further past it. As we turn around, guy looks like he has suddenly passed out on his bike, his head down and shoulders slumped. I was about to say something to him, but my friend stopped me and said we really needed to leave him. I agreed, not wanting to be around him much longer either. After a few seconds, I take a peek over my shoulder. He's gone. Vanished. The worst part is, even if he had turned around and started pedaling as fast as he could, we still would have been able to see him some ways down the road. I panicked, but also slightly relieved he wasn't there anymore. We continue walking, trying to pretend we aren't creeped out. Walking quickly from streetlight to streetlight, finally, we reach my driveway. My driveway is a long road of darkness. We hadn't put any lights in yet to try and brighten it. We begin to walk slowly, holding our breath. Some weird feeling of dread came over me the closer and closer we got to my house, and the further into the driveway we entered. I don't know what came over us, but the sudden feeling of, you need to run, and you need to run fast, came over us at the same time. We took off bolting at the exact same time without having to say a word to each other. We got to my front door. I unlocked it quicker than I have ever before. We get inside. I slammed the door closed and locked it, and dropping to the ground in fear. We both sat there holding our breaths, scared to even breathe. Fast forward a couple of weeks. My friend Stacy and I had forgotten about what happened. Suddenly, it came up in a conversation, and we tried to find the sound we heard. Nothing worked. We looked up every possible animal, even animals that weren't likely. We spent an hour on this, until we decided to look up the sound of a wendigo. It was the only sound that fit perfectly. We don't joke or talk about it now. I won't. I hate to. That man we saw that night, we may never know who or what he was. But as far as I know, I'm happy keeping that a mystery for the rest of my life. The singular knock I heard was followed up by what sounded like scratching at the door. The scratching sounded more like it came from a wild animal, and not some creep who stealthily knocked on people's doors for cruel laughs. I jumped so high that I had to stop myself from falling. My heart began to race as I felt the same fear I had when I thought back to the first incident. Snapping out of it and moving quickly, I stood up and frantically searched for some sort of weapon. I wasn't taking any chances. This had become too real now. I was at the corner now, preparing myself for the worst. Fighting my racing heart and shaking hands, I turned to the corner, not knowing what I would be met with. The first thing I saw was my dog Sam. I felt a little relieved at the sight of him, thinking he was a source of scratching, except he was moving. The scratching was still persistent. Sam, however, was staring straight towards the scratching. His hairs were rising as he began to growl at the door. That was the last straw for me. I dropped the knife and ran for my home phone that sat on the end of my table. My hands were shaking profusely as I held the phone and dialed 911, shakingly holding the phone up to my ear. I turned around facing the kitchen. I immediately regret that decision. I dropped the phone I was holding. I could hear the muffled questions of the operator. For the first time, I felt genuine fear for my life. He was tall, my God. So tall I couldn't see his face. Through the doorway into the kitchen, he was also quite slender. But it wasn't his build that was intimidating. He wore a dark suit with a red and white striped tie, with a clean white undershirt. The worst feature, however, was his hands. Long, bony, and half-clenched fingers. The nails, too, were long and almost sharp. The color of his hands were a silky white. I stared in horror. Sam was nowhere to be seen, but I didn't care at that time. My entire focus was on this demon in my own home. Too scared to move, I stood motionless, if shaking violently could be considered so. I began ever so slightly moving towards the door. Then he moved. A single long stride, then another. Once more. It only took him 3 to reach the doorway. That's when he ducked, and I saw his cursed face. He was smiling, a crooked and broken grin that stretched along his entire face. His face was the same silky pale his hands were. The eyes were shattered and piercing, staring directly into my soul. One last attempt at safety. I unlocked it, but got no further. I felt a cold and skinny hand rest on my shoulder. I froze. The other hand slowly moved into my view, covering my mouth with a deathly cold grip. I gasped and woke up. Sitting straight up, my entire body was covered in a cold sweat. I was breathing, heavily, still shaking. I should have felt relieved that it was all over, that it was all a dream. And yet, there was still that tension in the air. The same fear that one felt so real began to return, paralyzing me, and from the corner of my eye, I could see the same shattered eyes that had once stared me down. He was standing in the doorway, smiling. Then he opened his crooked mouth, and in a raspy voice said,
"You should have went back to sleep."
"Hello, friends. It is me, Lucid Lupus. Thank you so much for 50 subscribers, and thank you for watching my special. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, I will leave my email in the description if you would like to send me your own story. But thank you so much again for 50 subs. I can't believe we made it this far. If you guys would like to hit me up on my social media, I would love to meet and talk to you guys. But thank you for being loyal fans and being the amazing people you are. I'll see you guys in the next video.